for us individuals that haven't exercised this creative muscle in writing and writing songs and lyrics and poetry, what's the process like? How do you know when you're done? Like, how do you get better at it?
One thing that inspires me is that I write about me. I write about my true experiences. I focus on my story, my truth. What I like to tell other poets who've asked this question is that only you can tell your story. And your story is always right because it is your story. It's always unique. It's a powerful message because who's going to question me? You can't tell me what my truths are, my background, my lived experiences are. I don't think I have all the answers, so I continue to go to workshops. A lot of times when I talk to poets where I feel like they get stumped, they feel like they've learned everything that they can learn. They've taken all the workshop. They're not trying to stretch themselves. So just continuing to learn and study the craft of poetry, study the craft of spoken word, going to open mics, just knowing that I don't know everything, I think also keeps me fresh and keeps me inspired.
I would love to ask you if you're working on any poetry that you could maybe share with us.
Okay, Blank Screen Canvas, Charity Blackwell.
Hey everyone, Ashley Hatch here, another special episode of Ditto. We are super excited for our episode today. We have the one and only Charity Blackwell here with us on our episode of Ditto. Matt, Charity, how are we doing today? You guys good?
I'm excited. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be sitting here with you and Matt and into
Us
some
too.
conversation.
Yeah.
We are excited for sure.
Good. All right. Well, I'm gonna give our guests a little bit of background on who Charity is. Charity is a DEI practitioner, spoken word artist, host, MC, and poetry specialist. She's the chief of chief of culture and arts at DC Scores, which is where we made our connection. Obviously, shout out to DC Scores. She is a Trinity University grad where she got her bachelor's and master's for communication. She also got her certificate for executive leadership for diversity, equity, and inclusion from Georgetown University. And I think one of my favorite titles of yours is you're the director of poetry events at Busboys and
great.
Poets, which I feel like that title was made and named just for you. But anyway, welcome, Charity. We're super excited to talk to you about a lot of things, but especially your experience with DC Scores and poetry. Something that I couldn't find on Google, but I wanted to make sure that I was correct. You're originally from South Carolina.
Yes.
And you played soccer at Trinity University.
Correct.
What part of South Carolina, Charity? Where in South Carolina?
It's this small town called Rock Hill, South Carolina. It's very northern, approximately like 15, 20 minutes, depending on who's driving, from Charlotte. So it's right there on the northern border.
Oh yeah, we lived in Columbia for a little bit.
Oh, nice.
There
I
in
got
South
some
Carolina.
family out there.
Yeah, we love South Carolina. In Charleston, and I mean South Carolina, Greenville. There's so many wonderful places in South Carolina.
100%.
Awesome.
Love it. Yes,
Awesome.
yes.
Nice. Cool. Well, I think it'd be really interesting for you to kind of tell us the story of like why poetry? Like how did poetry become such a big part of your life? When was it first introduced to you, and how did it evolve into, your livelihood is now poetry?
Word. So, great question. I try to keep it short. I try to get better at answering this. Poetry kind of came about on accident. So I grew up. I was born in Arizona. Then my dad was in the Air Force, so that's why we moved to South Carolina. Him and my mother met in Fort Sumter. And so we were stationed in Arizona. Then we drove our van from Arizona to South Carolina. If you were to ask my dad, he would say that we visited all these places. I was 3 years old. I don't remember any of these places. But we drove from Arizona to South Carolina. And that was where I was raised. I grew up in a Catholic elementary school, then went to public middle school and high school. And In elementary school, we only had two sports. We had soccer and softball. I went to both tryouts, but the softball tryout, I saw a girl get smacked in the face with the softball. So it made that option of sports that I would try to do very easy. So that's where soccer kind of got introduced into it. But the poetry component, as I, went through elementary school, we then transitioned into public school, which was very different. I felt like I didn't fit in elementary school because I was like me and my sister were two of like four black kids at the school. And then when I went to public school, I was then there with more diverse crowd, but I was looked at as the outside kind of girl that just came from a Catholic school, talked proper, all these different things. So I was looking for things that would naturally allow me to make connections with people. And I loved hip hop, I love rapping, and I love sports. And so I started battle rapping kids in middle school. And that's kind of where the flow and the rhythm came into play. Not thinking anything about poetry. That's just where I loved writing. I would write raps. I would go out, battle folks, and that was pretty good. Kids were like, "Oh, she got bars," and so that was a way that I actually used it to become, to build community and to build connection, to find something that people who I couldn't relate to in other spaces, we all had at least something that we liked or something in common with that piece. High school, I needed another creative arts class, so I took poetry and started writing and got feedback that, oh, this is really cool. But more importantly, I just enjoyed it for myself, so I just began writing just to write. Then for Black History Month, we had to do a project on a famous historic black figure. I did Langston Hughes and fell in love with Langston Hughes poetry. So the written form, I just fell in love with in high school on accident. It wasn't like I was out searching for poetry. It just became a thing. And I just kept writing ever since. Then when I moved from South Carolina to Washington, D.C., I came up here for college. That was when I was introduced into spoken word. So poetry, that's the written form. That's where you just write it and put all your feelings on the paper, all the poetic devices going into that. Spoken word is when you take that and you actually use that as a way of expression through performance, kind of theatric performance, if you will. And that's when folks were like, hey, I took another creative writing class in college. Professor said, you're awesome. You should go to Busboys and Poets. Like, what's Busboys and Poets? What are you talking about? And so I checked it out, and it's like being introduced to poetry and spoken word around around a time where, imagine being introduced to spoken word around the same time like you were introduced to basketball when Michael Jordan was in his prime. This is when poetry was really popping in DC. I mean, this is when Clint Smith was starting to do poetry in Busboys and Poets. Poets like Elizabeth Acevedo, Pages Matan, Jason Reynolds, all these folks that have really big names for themselves in poetry. I was introduced into spoken word by seeing them at Busboys and Poets. And so I fell in love with spoken word at that point. So I started slams at my college, started performing my pieces, got really inspired. And then after I graduated, I stopped writing for a while because I was just kind of dealing with just a lot of trauma that happened. My mother got sick and then she passed away. And then, my father, 2 years later, I'm a firm believer people can die of a broken heart. He passed away. And I remember my teacher at the time, the one that made me go to Busboys and Poets, my creative arts teacher in college, she wrote me on Facebook and was like, Charity, whatever you do during your pain and your trauma, always write. And I still have this Facebook message. She unfortunately passed during COVID, but I still have this Facebook message on my Facebook page where she said, whatever you do, your power is writing. And so I picked up writing again. And honestly, that was what helped me get through some really, really, really tough situations. So that's how I was introduced into poetry, and has guided me all the way up to now, to where I work at an organization where I'm serving youth that through poetry, through spoken word, through service, which is kind of full circle because that's like my life story. I feel like DC Scores was created for me personally to work there because it's just everything that I believe in and love and passionate about all in one, that I'm able to pay it forward to things that have been, to these passions of mine that have really carried me through life. Whew,
Yeah.
long-winded. Yeah.
Wow. No, that was awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's really powerful. And Matt and I obviously have a lot of conversations around mental health, mental performance, and something that we often refer to, an exercise we like to encourage everyone to do, is to write or to journal. And not only for like the mental performance side, but just for life. Like, it's so important to be able to have that time with yourself, with your pen and your paper, and to just reflect. And I feel like I learn the most of myself or from my situations when I'm writing. And I think when you look back on those hard times or even the good times, I love looking back in my journal and like seeing how far I've come and seeing how I've like navigated certain situations. And so it's really cool to hear that you found your passion for poetry through writing and through others like encouraging you to do that. I think that's really awesome.
100%. Yes, yes. But yeah, that's interesting because I've done this thing now recently where I used to get really stuck in finishing a poem, and I would go back and just be looking through poems and like, wow, I can't find a perfect ending for this. I can't find a perfect ending for this. And then it dawned on me that I was actually talking to this poet, legendary poet from Baltimore named Gail. I was interviewing her during when I was doing some type of panel discussion over COVID virtually. She and I don't know how it happened, but how somehow the interview then flipped on me because she just just savvy like that. And she was asking me like, what's the latest poem I wrote? And I was telling her, well, it's not done, but this is what I'm working on. She's like, all right, well, share it. Then I shared it, and she's like, oh, it's finished. And I was like, what you mean? It's like, it's no happy ending here. It's like, but she's like, but then she explained to me that sometimes that is the poem. Like, poetry, writing is a snapshot of your lessons, your life. And sometimes the poem is done. And sometimes you got to look back and be like, dang, I was going through it then, but look at where I am now. You shouldn't feel like you have to go back and change anything. What you've written is just like a still moment of that emotion and that feeling. So yeah, I think that is healthy to look through, whether that's just journaling, poetry, whatever, just so you can have that reminder of, oh, this was a really beautiful time. This was a really tough time. This was a really confusing time in life, so you can have those times of reflections and learn from them. So
God, I love that. Charity, in relation to that, I have a question for you.
sure.
My experience of writing is academic, which is really boring and nobody reads, if we're being honest. Like journal articles, it's like, come on, like why are we publishing this? And so, like with that in mind, like I'm fascinated by, like I'm reading a sci-fi book right now, and I'm just like, how do you come up with this and make it cohesive and align, and there's themes, and make it interesting and engaging, and then writing songs like that creative process is so beyond me, but I know, if I were to be deliberate about it, I could get better at it and actually do some of this. Anyways, I guess my question is, for us individuals that haven't exercised this creative muscle in writing songs and lyrics and poetry, what's the process like? And I mean, how do you know when you're done, like you just mentioned, and then how do you get better at it and create more poetry and create more songs? I know there was a ton of questions in there, so if you need me to rephrase any of that, please let me know.
That's really awesome. So there's a couple things there. One thing that for me as a poet, that is helpful for me, and I think in the recent years I've just studied poetry more, so I feel like I'm better at creating outside of things that I just love. But one thing that like inspires me is that I write about me. I write about my true experiences. I focus on my story, my truth, And what is so powerful, and what I like to tell other poets who've asked this question, is that only you can tell your story, and your story is always right because it is your story. And when I think when it comes to like academics and other works, you're writing about, I mean, let's just, your biography or something like that. I don't know, but you're more mostly writing about other things. But with
Totally. Yeah.
poetry, what I like and what helps me is when I write about me, when I write about my experience or things that have impacted me or things through my eyes. It's always unique. It's my own, and it's the truth. It's a powerful message because who's gonna question me? Like, this is like, you can't tell me what my truths are, my background, my lived experiences are. Another thing is like, I don't think I have all the answers, so I continue to go to workshops. I continue to
There she goes. There's the cat.
I continue to read. I continue to read poetry books that have different types of writing workshops in them. I have actually shared one with you that's one of my favorites. But I continue to get, a lot of times when I talk to poets, where I feel like they get stumped, they feel like they've learned everything that they can learn. They've taken all the workshops. They're not trying to stretch themselves anymore. So just continuing to learn and study the craft of poetry, study the craft of spoken word, going to open mics, just knowing that I don't know everything, I think also keeps me fresh, and keeps me inspired. Even when I'm thinking about my lived experiences, I might hear someone else talk about their lived experience and be like, that's something I've kind of can relate to, or or I might see this from a different perspective. That might be something I want to write about, but from this angle. Yeah, I think that's it in practice. And get feedback, practice, learning, and get feedback from folks, I think has been helpful. But biggest key thing for me is just sticking to what I know, and not trying to write other people's stories, but write my own, has been helpful for me in my journey in poetry.
Wow, we can learn a lot just about that last phrase alone, I think, in any domain in life. Anyways, beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. I guess I need to gain more insight into my own story and figure out how I can put it on paper. I've never attempted to do it. And so it's, again, the idea of writing a poem or a story just coming from my own brain sounds so difficult. I need data to support what I'm writing, and I need to see others' experience, right? Like you were just saying. And so it's fascinating to me, but I think that idea, like you mentioned, is beautiful. So thanks for sharing.
I love it. Yeah, and I think another thing that one poet, her name's Simply Sherry. I told her, because in April we have 30 for 30, where I don't do it. I like to watch people do it, but people get 30 prompts for each day, and they're supposed to write a poem every single day. And so I remember asking, what are folks' favorite prompts? And this poet, Simply Sherry, she was saying, well, there's one way to not necessarily a prompt, but a way to address writing. To approach writing that kind of stretches you, but kind of makes you think about your lived experiences in more of a creative way. So, like, talking about using an object to explain an experience that you went through. So, for instance, a book, the chapters of my life. From beginning to end, I'm turning a page of a new leaf, or something like that. So it's also helpful to just get like starters, like a starter pack, if you will. Like, so prompts and stuff are also helpful. Sorry, just wanted to add that too.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. I think it's really cool to see, like, this is your craft, and like you said, like, you have to practice it, you have to be exposed to it, you have to learn from others. But correct me if I'm wrong, the poetry, like, community just seems very welcoming and not very, like, not competitive or combative, because, like, you're all, like you said, telling your own stories, you're all on your own journey, and you're all helping each other through life, but also through this craft of poetry. Is that Is that the right pulse that because like all the poetry people that I come across, especially in DC Scores, seem that way, but I could be wrong.
No, you're right. You're right. So here's a cool thing. So you're right. Yes, the poetry community is very, very welcoming and also extremely competitive. So just like you see in DC Scores, the poetry component of our program is extremely welcoming. But then if you go to a slam, it gets pretty intense. And that's from the coaches down to the students, from the community members, the family members. So using poetry as a way to compete, I definitely see it get, I see the competition come out, but it's friendly competition.
Yeah.
Overall, essentially, the poetry community in DC, I would say the DMV area is very tight knit. We have some of the best poets, I would say, in the U.S. in this bucket, in this pocket here in the DMV, and yeah, like up the street we have Baltimore. We have nationally ranked poets in Baltimore for winning Women of the World Poetry Slam, Individual World Poetry Slam, Southern Fried Poetry. All of the awards you can think of have all been won in this vicinity. So
Wow.
there's a lot of really amazing poets that take their craft seriously. But also we put each other on. Like you've been to our events at DC Scores. We have
Yeah.
the best poets coming through and teaching our kids. So it's
Yeah.
a really awesome community. We pour into each other.
Yeah.
For sure.
That's really
Could
cool.
could either of you just tell us what DC Scores is? I'm vaguely familiar with it because of Ashley, but
Yeah.
I'm sure there are listeners that don't know what you're talking about. I think you've mentioned it 2 or 3 times now. Could you
Yeah.
tell us what it's all about, if you don't
Yeah,
mind?
for sure. I'll start us off.
Go ahead, Ashley. Come on.
Well, I'm wearing my DC Score shirt today because I
You
thought it
better
was
represent.
appropriate. But anyway, DC Scores is a after-school nonprofit program for kids to develop confidence through poetry, soccer, and service learning. And we have over 3,000 poet athletes. Is that correct?
Yes. Yup.
I've been to enough
Wow.
events now where Charity and Katrina and Tony, where I'm listening to their pitches, so that I can make sure that I'm repping. But I'm on the board of DC Scores. I originally got introduced to DC Scores when I started playing for the Spirit, and I just really enjoyed going to all their events, their poetry slams, soccer. When I first got introduced to it, it's kind of like you don't really understand how like soccer and poetry and service learning, like how they all belong together, but it's honestly it's this beautiful combination that I feel like allows the kids to express themselves through soccer, through poetry, and also learn to give back to their community and to just learn good habits such as service and in their community and to care for their community. And it's just been a really cool organization to be a part of. It's been a blessing in my life for sure, to be a part of the organization. And every time I'm at an event, like I get to rub shoulders with people like Charity and Tony and Katrina and everyone on staff. Like everyone truly cares for the DC community and just helping these kids develop and live their best lives. I mean, I think the future is going to be great because of these kids that go through the DC Scores programs. But that's kind of a snapshot. What did I miss, Charity?
No, you were spot on. You have definitely been practicing your pitch, but that was amazing. That was great.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
You didn't miss anything.
Well, I feel like this would be a good natural transition then to talk more about your work with DC Scores. And I read in one of your bios, or maybe a video because I was stalking you obviously before this, that you first got introduced to DC Scores when you were at Trinity University. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes. I was actually in my senior year for undergrad, and I was working as a front desk manager of our athletic center. And around that time, DC Scores was doing their fall frenzy at Trinity.
Oh, nice.
And so they happened to do it a day that I was working. And I remember going outside and just thinking to myself, oh my goodness, all these kids, all this trash I'm gonna have to pick up. And I was just like going back in like, oh my goodness, I'm gonna need support, I'm gonna need help. And they're like, yeah, that's DC Scores. And I'm like, who's DC Scores? They're like, oh, it's this soccer, poetry, and service learning program. You should check them out, Charity. I'm like, you're lying. Soccer, poetry, service sounds like me. What are we talking about? So then I did look it up, and it was real. And I was like, what? And it was so timely because at that time I was trying to figure out what I was going to do after college. I was in government, but I didn't really like it. I was at the Census Bureau. I was interning there, and I had an opportunity to continue there, but I wanted to do a little bit more direct impact work. And this was right up my alley, and there were things that I loved. So they had a position open at the time for soccer program coordinator through AmeriCorps. And so I applied, and then I got the job. So I served there just for 1 year through AmeriCorps, and I loved it, adored it. And then I left and went back to government because I finished my 1 year, and I was then finishing up my last year in my master's program. And so after I finished the master's program, I stayed in government for maybe like 2 more years. And then they had another opening up at DC Scores. But I stayed involved with DC Scores when I left because I loved the organization, loved the program. And just full transparency, the money wasn't right at the time. So I needed to,
That's
be able
important.
to afford DC. So I went back. That's why I went back into government. So then when the position opened up, that seemed up my alley. And, you know, work that I was definitely passionate about doing for the organization, and which at the time was director of programs, and I applied for that. And I remember Bethany, she was the ED at the time. She called me and was like, "We want to hire you, but we want to bring you on for just like overseeing all of poetry." I was like, oh, "Okay, cool. I mean, is the salary going to stay the same?" But anyway, it didn't matter. Like, it was all good. Everything worked out. So I came on as director of writing. Then over the years, my role kind of transitioned from like being directly working with programming to kind of overseeing the arts component and the culture and the DEIAB work. So I was director of writing, then director of creative arts and education, and then in 2020 I transitioned over to senior of arts and culture, and then as recent as 2 years, I've been their chief of arts and culture at the organization. So I still oversee all the poetry component of what they do, as well as leading the people work, the culture and diversity, equity, inclusion work at the organization. So that's my journey of getting into DC Scores, and I love it. There have to be like something really wild to pop up for me to leave. But it's an amazing organization. And I was just like you. I was skeptical. I was like, I like all these things, poetry, soccer, service learning, but I'm not sure how this all goes together. But working through at the organization for a full year and being on the ground, going and doing site visits, going into all the schools, all over DC. I'm over in Southeast, I'm in Northwest, I'm in Northeast. I'm seeing the reach that our organization has and the power that poetry is pouring into our kids' experiences, as well as the soccer and them leading in service learning projects. It was just mind blowing for me. So I'm super happy and honored and blessed to be a part of this organization.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
that's really cool. Thanks for sharing that. And so for those that don't know, part of DC Scores, like we obviously have soccer camps, after school programs. I play lots of soccer and games, but the poetry side was something for me that was completely new. Like, I learned poetry in school like everyone else, and I absolutely hated it because I didn't fully understand it, and I don't think I was having fun with it. I think it was just like my teachers were teaching me to like check it off the list of things to learn.
Right.
So that part of DC Scores, like, I didn't fully understand, but I was obviously all on board with the soccer side. But I've learned a lot about poetry, and I've come to greatly appreciate it so much since my time at DC Scores. But can you give us a little bit of insight into the power that poetry has for these kids and their ability to express themselves? Because I've been to some of these poetry slams, and for those kids to stand up on stage with that mic and they don't have a paper in front of them, they stand up there.
Really?
Yes, it's so impressive.
Wow.
I stood up there on stage and I had to have my paper and I was like shaking and I had to have Charity standing next to me. I had to do it with her. But yeah, these kids, they stand up there, they perform their poetry, and not only do they perform it, they do it with just like so much like authority and passion, or just like you can, or even if they're nervous, you can like feel it, and it makes it even that much more genuine. Like, can you just speak to your experience with these kids and like how you've seen it transform their lives and like maybe give them confidence or whatever it is?
Absolutely, 100%, yes. Most of our kids are kind of similar to your experience. A lot of kids come into our program skeptical about poetry. They're drawn in by the soccer, and then the poetry, it feels like somewhat of an add-on. But then when they go into the classroom and when they get into the writing workshops, and then they see other spoken word artists that look like them, with passions, same passions as them, doing really, really good poetry, really, really good spoken word, you can see kind of this switch happen. And it's not this boring art form that is, in no shade to, Nikki Giovanni and Maya Angelou, but the writing component is one thing, right? But then the performance is another thing. And I think what is beautiful, what I see blossom from the poet athletes that we serve, is you'll see the different kids that have their preference in writing, and whether that's the ones that don't really want to be up on stage and performing, but they create beautiful poetry. They're able to really, really get their emotions out on the page. And sometimes we have kids that get on stage and they're not the lead role, they're not the individual poet, but they're still finding their voice with themselves. And that's the thing that's most powerful, that I think. And then you do have those kids that are getting up there that, as you've seen at Our Words Are City, they may be that Carter or,
Yeah.
or that Asher, or that kid that just really, really stands out. And they find their voice, and they may have found a passion or an art form that may carry them to other things in life, whether that's through poetry, whether that's through public speaking, who knows. But I do think we're teaching kids to be able to process their emotions, process their feelings, to put that on paper, then also be able to articulate that, share that in a beautiful and creative way with people that they trust, mentors that they trust, in a community that they trust, which I think is really, really powerful. And so out beyond what we do at DC Scores, I hope that we are just scratching the surface for them to begin to use these tools as use poetry as a tool to take them through taking care of themselves through life, and hopefully carrying them through whatever they decide to do beyond what our organization has to offer. I wish DC Scores could go all the way up through high school, through college, and be, supportive in those spaces. But I do think we are giving kids tools to be healthy and emotionally, mentally, and learning how to lean in on their community, which I think is really, really powerful, because poetry begins with self, but I do think there is power in community. So yeah, that's
Wow.
where I see power in, for sure.
Charity, that's amazing. I mean, I didn't realize, kind of this regulatory emotional process that exists within, DC Score specifically, but just expanding that to the masses that don't have access to DC Scores, right? How could a person like myself who hasn't ever done it, how could poetry facilitate that human experience? How can one engage with it and hopefully, like you were mentioning, acquire or maybe experience some of those experiences of learning more about your emotions in a really healthy way and expressing them via poetry? How can someone, again, outside of DC Scores, engage in something like that, like poetry?
Oh, well, I'm not trying to plug anything here, but
Plug
Please
it.
I'm not trying to
plug
plug, but
away.
if the door's open, I'm walking in. So I think that what is, and this is where it was kind of full circle for me, because I feel like what is created in open mics, in trusted, safe, and brave spaces like a Busboys and Poets open mic, it's kind of the same like community and culture that I see created in our kids' workshops with their peers and their coaches. And so I think for folks who are not a part of DC Scores, and the beautiful thing, especially if you're in a space like DC or New York or Boston, who has a very heavy poetry scene, and if you don't, that's okay. I have something else for you too. I suggest going to these spaces and checking out places that have open mics, that have safe and brave communities where they are encouraging people to be vulnerable, to be open, to listen, to write, and to be in community with each other. At Busboys and Poets, I host every second Tuesday and second Friday. I have people who return every single time I host because they like the community that is built in there. And we're very intentional about the spaces that we say. We don't welcome any hate speech, ugly, offensive speech. We don't welcome anybody putting anyone down. There's no booing. We are open to any and all art forms, and we're here to be supportive, and we're here to root everyone on and give them encouragement in their process and their journey through writing. So I think having community like that is really important, because that is the type of support that you'll need. You don't want to, it's not like comedy where you go and they're going to boo you and be like, man, you stuck. Like this is the poetry space is very warm and welcoming. So I've been to open mics and spaces all over the US, and I haven't been to one where I was like, whew, this is cringe. I think that it's pretty consistent across the board. Another thing that's been beneficial since COVID, since the pandemic, because COVID still exists, since the pandemic lockdown, a lot of virtual spaces have blossomed from that and continue to do so. I know a bunch of free online workshops, online open mics, online slams where you can compete, where I think is really cool. So there's so many opportunities for folks to find where they fit in, and there's something for everyone. You got the hardcore slam poets that have their spaces. You have the lover boy folks that want to do the little romantic stuff. You got people who want to talk about grief and trauma. There's something for everyone out there. So I just encourage folks to get out there, just put yourself, just explore, and I guarantee you will find community somewhere.
Well, maybe you can put some of those in the show notes, or I don't know, in
Yeah,
the
we can
comments.
share. We can definitely share.
Because I know I'm interested, and I'm sure
Yeah.
people like myself who have never been to something like this would be interested as well. So that
Yeah.
would be great.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, I definitely need to come to Busboys and Poets. It's been on my list. I just haven't been able to make it out, but I've heard so many great things. So, yeah, for sure. Thanks for sharing that with us. Okay, another question that I have about DC Scores and these poet athletes is, so I've been to a poetry slam where a poet athlete is standing up there and they start their poem, but they freeze because they forgot their line. And then they take a deep breath, they're very calm, and they start over. Sometimes they'll do it 2-3 times. Sometimes they'll pause for a solid minute. But they just are so calm, so collected, and I mean, you could tell that they're nervous, but they're keeping their composure, and they continue. I've never seen a poet athlete quit and walk off the stage without finishing their poem. And oftentimes it's those poems that don't go as smoothly as they would have hoped that I feel like are the most powerful. And I'm just always in awe. So I would love if you could give us a sneak peek behind the scenes of what that looks like when you are preparing your poet athletes to stand on stage and perform, a poem that's about themselves or something that's like very special and near and dear to their heart, and they forget their lines. Like, what, as an educator, as a teacher, like, how have you prepared your poet athletes to do that? Because I think it's so fascinating.
Oh, wow. So yeah, those are some of, it sounds weird, but I want to say some of my favorite moments at poetry slams, where you can, and I've been there myself, where you can prepare as much as you want and you can still just blank out. And it's just been so amazing and powerful for me to see where the teammates are cheering them on and telling them to keep going. everyone in the crowd, even though it's a competition, they're still clapping them up, telling them to keep going. What we encourage our coach, what our coach mentors to do in their sessions is to make sure that they are very clear. As much as this is a competition, this is supposed to be a community event. And when we say that, like, someone's walking out with first, second, third place, but this is supposed to be a celebration of everything that our kids have learned. This is supposed to be a celebration of each other. This is supposed to be a celebration of all the hard work that everyone's done, all the coaches, all the kids. So even though we make this competition, we encourage our coach mentors to be very clear that this is more so about our kids overcoming their fears, our kids trying something that may be scary, that may be challenging, but pushing through and persevering. Whether we get first place, second place, third place, that doesn't matter. What matters is that you get up on stage and you push through and you get through something that is challenging with your team backing you, with your community backing you and supporting you. And so that's from the beginning, how we have that embedded in our curriculum and how we're teaching that throughout the season, as we call it, all the way up to the slam where we're in the back room before they even get on stage. And we have our staff back there talking to the kids, hyping them up, letting them know, hey, go out there and do your best. It doesn't matter if you mess up. It doesn't matter if you forget. Just keep pushing and keep going. And so I think that what really encourages our kids is that, yes, it's a competition and it's supposed to be competitive, but what I feel like pushes them through is that they are there to just face their biggest fear, which is themselves, which is getting through something that all of them, I don't care if they are in a youth word project and they're practicing poetry every day, it is scary. I still get scared going on stage. And I've been doing this. I've been at this for about 15 years. And so it's a big deal for them to just do it, to just show up and to get through their poetry. So that is what I've seen in behind the scenes through the year, be helpful for our kids to feel inspired to get up, and whether they get through it or not, keep going regardless.
Yeah.
Charity, there's so many beautiful things in there. Have you seen that experience alone translate into other areas of their life? Relationships, education, sports, whatever it might be. I mean, that getting up there and that resiliency and bravery and discipline to practice, there's so many things to pull from that I would, in theory, imagine translate into other areas. Have you had that experience with some of these kids?
100%. And I think that's what's beautiful about our program, where it kind of clicked for me, because it's not a la carte. The team moves as a unit. So the same team that's out there playing soccer, that entire same team is the same one that goes on the stage and does a group poem all together and an individual poem. The same team that then moves into the next season leading a service learning project together. So you can't do just the poetry or just the soccer or just the poetry and the service learning. You have to do all three. So I do think that you're having to keep that same team dynamic that you have on the soccer field, on the poetry stage, and leaning that into your service learning project. So that same attitude of, we got to keep going. I know we're tired. I know we're down 6 points. It's not 6. We don't want I know we're down 3, but we still got to push through. We're still going to have fun. I know that I'm tired, but I'm going to hustle as fast as I can, as hard as I can, at least finish this game strong. I know I may have missed that last goal, but I'm not going to walk off the field. I'm going to keep moving. That same mentality transitions over into the poetry space. Yeah, I may not feel too confident in my memorization, but I'm going to try to do my best today. And even if I mess up, I'm going to keep going. I'm not going to let my team down. I'm not going to let myself down. I'm not going to let my coach down. So I do think the structure of our program makes it easy for you to see how that translates in different spaces. But I do see our kids, especially ones that we work with, from my lens, because I work heavily with the poetry side, but the kids that do our enhanced poetry, which is called Youth Word Project. So we have our core programming, which is our second through 8th grade programming, which is elementary all the way up through middle school. That's our core programming, which is soccer, service learning, poetry. Then we have our enhanced programming for alumni or kids who just want to continue to do poetry. They get those extra workshops in and get to do like special performances. I get to see those kids and work with them more one-on-one, and I've seen how DC scores into poetry has impacted their lives and how they're continuing to excel in different areas of their lives. We've had 2 kids get accepted to Duke Ellington in the last 2 years that are part of our program. So I've seen a whole generation go through college that have gone through our program. So it's easy to see. It's easier for me to see from that lens on the poetry side, but absolutely just honestly just watching our program in the different sectors that our kids move through, you see it show up in just those different spaces as well in real time.
Yeah, that's so cool. It's so powerful. And if any of our listeners are local DC people, like, you have to go out and watch these poet athletes on stage. It's super powerful, honestly, life-changing. I really enjoyed it. And I think it's also really cool from a teacher, coach, educator perspective. Like, when I was watching it and they would, those poet athletes would maybe forget their line and have to start over, like, you want to just, like, go up there and, like, help, like, shade them from, like, the embarrassment, or you just want to help them. You want to bring them off stage and be like, it's okay, or try again, or whatever. But, like, you guys do a really good job of resisting the urge and letting them, like, grow through it and grow through the experience. And I think that's where you see it translate into their lives, because they're actually learning it. You're not just telling them these things like, okay, if you mess up, do this. But you're, like, giving them the opportunity to do it and live it out and live it through. And I just think it's so powerful. So thank you so much for sharing that. To wrap things up, I would love to ask you if you're working on any poetry or have a favorite poem that you could maybe share with us, or even our audience who have never been exposed to poetry. I know it's putting you on the spot, so you can say no, but you're just so good. You're so good and so talented. I would be so mad at myself if I didn't ask.
Okay, all right. Let's see. So
or do the one you've already done before. Whatever you need to do.
Well, this is good. I need some practice. I have to do this poem. I have an event actually in Florida next week. It's a security conference. It's a 3-day conference where I'm opening up poetry for cybersecurity experts in Florida for GSX. It's pretty dope. So I wrote a poem for them that kind of talks about AI. So
oh, nice.
We'll see. Let's go through this poem. So this is new, and I need to practice this anyway. So bear with me, friends. So the title of this poem is called. Oh, let me blow this up so I can see. All right, hold on, friends. Hold on, friends. Okay. All right, besties. This poem is titled Blank Screen Canvas. Like I said, bear with me, y'all. Fresh. Okay. Blank Screen Canvas, Charity Blackwell. What I believe makes art is its uniqueness to its manifester. Art can be inspired by others, reimagined, but never completely duplicated, because there's only one you who can genuinely do what you do, and it can be scary to think, to comprehend, to fathom that something beyond human can make art and possibly be more capable. I found out the other day that I may just be replaceable. A group of poets and I discussed the use of AI in poetry. We talked about how it can stretch its pen game to the likings of Maya Angelou, how it has cracked the code of Edgar Allan Poe, that there is an algorithm more creative than me, and I didn't want to believe it until I witnessed it myself. I typed into the dark screen, black like a dark hole that travels into the unknown. I commanded, write a haiku in the voice of Langston Hughes about the fear of AI. The AI responded, machines hum softly, dreams in circuits cold and bright. Man's soul fades tonight. My initial thought was, that's not creepy at all. My second thought was that's actually not bad at all. And if this machine that hums softly can write about itself in the voice of Langston Hughes, who do I think I am? Who needs a poet like me to write witty rhymes, to posture my pen, crafting truths muddled in similes, metaphors, alliterations? How can I compete with something that's always right when I'm full of so many errors? If I were a program, I probably not have the latest update, probably lag because my Wi-Fi is not fast enough, probably be hard to get into because my password is too hard to remember or too easy to access because I wear my heart on my sleeve. You know, human stuff. How can I compete with something that's always available, present, committed, and ready at the command of the user's fingertips? We artists can be aloof at times, and you can only access us when our schedules allows. But what I do believe makes art is its uniqueness to its manifester. And I also believe that the greatest art is pulled from the core of our souls. I may not have all the answers. What I do have is me. What I do have is my experiences. What I do have is my loved ones, my beliefs, my fear, my knowledge, my joy, my wins, my losses. And what is this? And what this screen that sits before me cannot compete with is my truth. It needs me more than I need it. It is nothing but a blank screen unless I pour myself into it. And even with AI in this world, I am absolutely 100% all human, undoubtedly, fully capable. I asked the AI, do you think you are me? It responded, no, I don't think I'm you. I'm here to assist you. I then asked, can you replace poets? It responded, I can't replace poets. Poets bring unique creativity and emotion that I can mimic but not truly replicate. Because what I believe makes art is its uniqueness to its manifester. And that's that poem.
Wow.
Wow, so good.
Thank you.
Wow.
So powerful.
That was Charity. Wow.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. What a treat. That was so
Incredible.
cool.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So,
Awesome.
Appreciate
Thanks for
it.
sharing that.
No,
Yeah.
thank you for pulling that out. I needed to get that out there. But
I mean, that was amazing. Cool.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, I mean, I feel like they just need to like mic drop
I
in
know.
there.
Golly. Such
Thank
a
you
great point.
Yeah, thank you so much for just sharing your story and sharing just your knowledge and all the experiences that you've had with DC Scores. I mean, I think we could probably talk for hours about all the experiences and the lessons that we learned from these poet athletes and just being a part of them in their lives and their community. And we just really appreciate your time. And I'm just happy that I get to see you around every time I go to DC Scores. So,
Well, thanks for having me, Ashley. You asked me to be on your podcast. I said, come on, Ashley, you already know. I got you. I got you. This has been awesome. It's nice to meet you as well, Matt. This has been a really awesome
Likewise.
conversation. And I really love what y'all are doing. So definitely keep this up for sure.
Thank
thanks.
you, Charity.
Appreciate
Really
it.
appreciate you.
All right, Matt. Quick debrief on our conversation with Charity. What were your thoughts? What were your takeaways?
Sheesh. It's hard to like condense that all into just a few thoughts. I was really inspired. Like, not only from her last poem that she just gave us, that we were all gifted. She hasn't even like sent it out to anybody yet. But just like the creative process for me is so foreign, like music and writing. Again, my writing is very academic, and so my creative muscle is really small and really weak and isn't flexible. And so like to talk to these people that are engaged in this, and it's inspiring, and to pull resiliency and confidence and bravery and organization and collective community all from this. I think there's just so much that we can learn, and I was pleasantly surprised, honestly, coming into this. I was like, she seems great, but I don't know what we're gonna talk about. And here we go. But it was amazing, and so again, my ignorance was that, and now I'm leaving very inspired. So there we go.
Well, good. Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way, but I knew it was going to be great because I know Charity, so I was super
There you go. I'm glad I
excited.
trust you, Ashley, so I'm glad I do that.
But yeah, two things that really stood out to me initially in the beginning when she was talking about her poem, like not being quote unquote finished, and then she shared it with a friend, and that friend said it's finished. the conversation that we talk about a lot about acceptance and being non-judgmental about where you're at or whatever it is that you're, creating, or if you're wanting to make a change, you have to accept where you're at before you can move on. I thought that was really cool, and I feel like that's a huge part of the process of poetry, especially like she said, when your poetry, your story is you, and in order to be able to tell that story, you have to be very non-judgmental, and you can't compare to other people's stories because that's not your story. And so I thought that was really powerful, and I thought it was really cool to see a topic that we talk about a lot of awareness and being non-judgmental express itself, reveal itself in the process that she uses for poetry. So I thought that was really cool. And then also just the emphasis on community was really cool as well. And just the importance of community. I think like some of the questions that you had about like how does one like start poetry, or how does one explore this creative side of themselves? I definitely think it's possible to do it alone, but like it's also really cool and helpful to be a part of a community that does it, because you watch other people stand up on stage and be vulnerable and share their stories, or just working with others and collaborating with others, being a part of a community that isn't going to judge you, that's warm and welcoming and empowering, and that encourages you to keep trying, to be your best self. I think that's just really important. I think it's a good reminder for all of us to take a step back and see what communities we are a part of, and are those communities doing those things for us, and are we contributing to communities like that? And if we're not, then maybe we need to switch communities. But I think that was also a reoccurring theme in the things that she was sharing. And just with DC Scores in general, the community, that aspect that they have is just so important and so powerful. So I also really enjoyed that aspect of it.
Yeah. Thanks for inviting her on. Seriously, that was all you, and I was very inspired. And I think there were a lot of beautiful things that we can pull from that. So DITTO, ditto. Hey, to end, can I share a joke that's been on my mind the last like 48 hours? And then we can wrap this up.
Yeah, for sure.
You ready?
Yeah.
All right, I got to get it right. So let me play a moment. Okay. What is Whitney Houston's coordination? What coordination does Whitney Houston rely upon?
I have no idea.
Hand-eye. Pretty good.
That was beautiful. Well
I
done.
know. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.